You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Greetings, Peter. How's it going tonight in Ottawa? How's the weather there?
We've had some wicked thunderstorms the past couple of nights, but we're burling on through, so we're good.
Well, you're probably catching the tail end of the storms that whipped through the Midwest over the weekend. It's probably just getting to you right now.
Well, there was tornadoes to the east of us, I believe, like a couple hours east of us, but we're good.
Yeah, we had a severe storm front that pretty much ran straight through Nebraska, through Kansas, through Oklahoma, and that's just all kept moving north and east.
Was the storm called Edgar?
I don't know if there was a name for it. Why?
Well, there was a storm in the Philippines, Frankie Edgar.
Oh, I see what you're doing there. Ha ha, very clever.
We got UFC Fight Night to talk about this week. We were going to tee up the big show in Vegas this week. Belfort had a good show last week as well. We got some news and one new fight of interest to talk about, but we got to start in the Philippines for last weekend's Fight Night show with the main event, Frankie Edgar against Uriah Don't Call Me Dan Marino Faber.
Now, here's the thing I want people to understand about this fight if they didn't watch it. And I understand some people probably didn't because it was on at 8 in the morning on Saturday. So.
Well, the main event wasn't, it was like 10 or 11, so.
Right, but I'm just saying there are people who were probably not watching it live and read the results later on in the day. And so they're going to think that fight was a blowout. They're going to look at that score 50-45 from all three judges and they're going to go, man, Uriah Faber just couldn't do anything, could he? 50-45 every judge. Well, that's not really an accurate representation of the fight because every round of that fight was really darn close. And each time, just by the smallest amount of margin, Frankie Edgar did a little bit better than Uriah Faber. So he gets the 10-9, but it wasn't a blowout.
No, it wasn't any round was close to a 10-8. I mean, it was a very good 10-9 rounds. Edgar does what Edgar does in big profile fights, and that is dominate, and he wins, and there was a story I read from Uriah Faber's camp, how they miss, now you're going to have to help me, Stevie, with the guy's name. Who was the babysitter to the stars?
Oh, you're talking about Burt Watson.
Well, he recently retired, right?
Yeah, he got in a little kerfluffle at one of the UFC shows and decided he'd had enough and went home.
So what happened was Faber's camp was complaining that the hotel where the fighters are staying at, Faber was right next door to Frankie Edgar. Like, they could arm in arm and touch each other from their front door. The rooms are that small and that close to each other.
Yeah, and usually Burt Watson was the guy who took care of things like that, like arranging rooms and shuttling people back and forth and making sure they had transportation and all that kind of stuff. He was the handler who made things go smoothly.
So it was a little bit of a hiccup there, but it's not an excuse at all. It's just one of those quirky little things you read about on fight week of a certain fight, so.
Well, I think the thing that everybody needs to take away from this is it cements Frankie Edgar as the next contender for Aldo and McGregor because he's clearly established his dominance at the weight class now. He beat Cub Swanson, who was the only other guy who was legitimately close to getting a title shot, and, you know, it doesn't really hurt Uriah Faber that much because he was going up in weight back to featherweight when he really regularly competes at bantamweight these days. So he doesn't lose anything in my estimation because it was a good fight. It was a very competitive fight. And Frankie Edgar gained something because he beat a really tough guy. And now he's definitely number one with a bullet for Aldo McGregor. Whoever wins that, he's got to be the next.
Well, I have something to dispute with that. According to the latest rankings, Faber does lose something. He goes down one spot to 4, and Rafael Assunção was up 1-3.
I suppose. I didn't vote to move him down a spot, and you know they send out a rankings brief now, right? Have I told you about this?
No.
Yeah. UFC has decided to help out the panelists on the ranking panel, and they send out a brief every week before the fights, and it says key things to watch. And what they said in the brief for Uriah Faber and Frankie Edgar was upside for Frankie Edgar, good to moderate. He's gonna gain something by winning a tough fight and possibly move into title contention. Downside, little to none. And then for Faber, it's like upside. He could become ranked in 2 different weight classes. Downside, absolutely none. He loses nothing as bantamweight.
No.
So their brief was saying, don't drop him if he loses this fight. That's basically what they were telling us.
Well, they dropped him.
Well,
And
some people did. It's always the aggregate. I say this over and over again. If more people put him down a spot than the rest did, he's going to drop. But that doesn't mean every single panelist dropped him.
No, but the aggregate shows that Sunset was now number 3. And also of interest, although Frankie Edgar did win quite decisively, 50-45, he's still...
I know. Decisive, you say dominant. It was neither of those things. It was the razor closest 50-45 you'll ever see.
But Edgar stays at number 2 at featherweight. Mendez is still number 1.
In my mind, he's probably number 1 now, but that's just me.
Now, also, pound for pound, Edgar cracks the top 15. He is now number 14. Interesting to see that Renan Barão down 1-11, Vitor Belfort down 1-15, and Cain Velasquez up 1-4, Ronda Rousey down 1-5.
Well, a lot of this is juggling right now because of the fact that John Jones is no longer in the top 15, so we're still getting the fallout from that of everybody trying to reshuffle the deck at the top 15 and pound for pound, trying to figure out who they think is the best without him around.
Mm-hmm. We've got news about well, someone said something about Belfort in the news. I'm not going to say who, but you can pretty much put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, I already know who, so we'll get to that when we get to that. Let's talk about the rest of these fights on the fight night in Manila, or at least the ones worth talking about.
Alright, Gegard Mousasi beating Costas Philippou, 30-27 across the board.
Yeah, not a super exciting fight in my estimation. What did you think, Peter?
It was Mousasi's fight to lose. Philippou, good fighter. Wasn't the fighter that I expected him to be this fight. I thought he put up more of a fight and he didn't.
Well, I hate to say he was exactly the fighter I thought he would be.
Mark Munoz beating Luke Barnett in his retirement fight, 30-27, 30-27, and 29-28. And I think Dana White said on Twitter, who scored that 29-28?
Yeah, I'd say Mark Munoz fought like the Mark Munoz of old, which I didn't know he still had it in him anymore, but if you're going to have one last fight on your retirement night and do it in basically your home country, that was the time for him to do it. He turned in, it's like he summoned up all his willpower and hulked up for one last match and made it through.
Great speech afterwards, and if you haven't seen it yet, be prepared to cut some onions.
Yeah, it's all over YouTube. It's everywhere. It's been watched a billion jillion times by now, and it's a tearjerker, but he talks a lot about family and priorities and how, his priority is not being a fighter anymore, so he has to go home and be with his family.
Can't fault him for that.
Nope, you can't. I have mad respect for Mark Munoz. He was one of the best in his day. He was often in the top 10 in the rankings when he was, competing at the elite level, and things started to go downhill for him the last few fights, but he's a hell of a nice guy and was always a great competitor in UFC, so I have nothing but nice things to say about Mark Munoz, and pretty much anybody that's ever met the man or talked to him or shook his hand feels the exact same way. He's always been and always will be a class act.
Absolutely. Moving on to the welterweights, Neil Magny knocked out Hyun-Gu Lim in the second round at 1 minute 24 seconds.
This was an insane fight because Hyun-Gu Lim had him in trouble in the first round, and I don't just mean he was, getting the better of him. I mean, had him wobbling, had him backing away, backpedaling, had him covering up. I mean, he was just this close to being done. So Magny not only weathered that storm, but then at the end of the first round, he came back and just started cracking Lim and had him in trouble with like seconds left in the round. And that fight just swung back and forth. And the thing that drove me crazy is the live feed kept cutting out on Fox.
The commercials, yeah.
Yeah, twice it went to commercials during the middle of that round. And one of my friends on Facebook said, it's Neil Magny, who cares? I'm like, you don't understand. This is like the best fight of the card.
Well, midway through that first round when Magny was getting rocked, I know I'm not at press row, so I can yell stuff at my TV. I'm saying, oh, get up. Like, I'm trying to urge him to get back. And somebody in a different room just yelled, they can't hear you.
You were having the pro wrestling mark out, basically.
Yeah, I'm like, get up. Like, just, it was so, such a quick bang, bang, bang by Lim. You're like, oh, he might stop Magny, who hasn't lost in forever.
Yeah, this is like his 7th or maybe even his 8th win in a row, so Magny is really putting it together of late.
Absolutely, and, quick peek at the welterweight rankings, he's up 2 spots to 13. Gunnar Nelson down 1 to 14, and Ryan LaFleur down 1 to 15.
Yeah, they're gonna have to give Neil Magny some top 10 competition now. He's earned it.
Okay, here's the 3 in front of him. You tell me who he's a better fit for. Kelvin Gastelum, Rick Story, or Thiago Alves?
I say Gastelum.
Really?
Yeah, I think if Gastelum wants to prove himself, he fights a guy like Neil Magny.
Because number 9 is someone I wouldn't want to fight, because if you're going to make your name off him, number 9 is Jake Ellenberger.
Yeah, that's a rock'em sock'em fight, and unless you like getting hit really hard, don't take a fight with Jake Ellenberger, because especially in the first round with a fight with Jake, that's when he's at his best, and if he cracks you in the first round, you could drop and not get back up.
Yeah, you'd be like, what truck just hit me?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, we have 2 split decisions to wrap up the main card here, with Philip Nover beating Yu Chul Nam and Levin Makashvili beating Mark Idiva. Split decisions here. The former was 29-28, 29-28, 28-29, and the latter was 29-28, 29-28, 28-29, and 30-27, which that score always irks me when you have a split decision. It's 2 rounds to 1, 2 rounds to 1, and then 3 rounds to nothing. It's like, how did you get that score?
Well, that sort of goes back to what I was saying about Faber and Edgar, is if every round is a close round, a 10-9 for either man is not always a bad decision. If all 3 rounds are close, then you can have one judge give all 3 rounds to the other guy.
I suppose. It's just, when I see that result, that's the first reaction I get, is like, oh boy, here we go.
Well, it is a natural tendency to look at that and think that the judges weren't even watching the same fight, because you expect more synchronicity if they're all sitting there at cage side and all viewing the same fight we're viewing. You would think their scores would tend to be similar, but it doesn't always work out that way.
No. Is there anything on the prelims that caught your eye?
Refresh my memory, because it's been a few days now, and I watched that show really early in the morning, so,
John Tuck beating Tai Hu Bang with a rear naked choke late in the first round.
That was a damn good fight. I thought that was the most impressive performance of John Tuck's career to date. And he's getting really known for turning in good fights on their overseas cards. He's kind of their home run hitter for that.
And the other one of interest, Li Jinlang beating Thiago Lima, minute 25 first round with a knockout.
Yeah, that was an impressive finish, and I think it's going to do some good movement for him in getting a bigger fight.
Mm-hmm. Now, it was either you or Kev, one of the two, that made this statement on Facebook saying, you gotta question the maturity of some people on Wikipedia.
Yeah, it was me who said that, because it said that he'd gotten beaten by some young ho.
God.
Yeah, Wikipedia is full of idiots like that.
Well, it's when Chael Sonnen had his Nevada State Athletic Commission hearing, someone claimed he had Sonnen's disease.
Yeah, I saw that one too. That was at least mildly humorous, but making racist Asian jokes on a Wikipedia fight page, that's not funny at all.
No. And, I mean, that's the thing with Wikipedia. It's a good resource when it's used properly, when you're using it for actual stuff, but when you're just on Wiki just to hack it and cause mayhem and misinformation, just stupid racist stuff.
Well, it's not even hacking. Hacking is when you break into something that's a closed system. Wikipedia is not a closed system. Anybody can edit it which is the reason you get dumb shit like this.
Absolutely. And I believe you're also live tweeting it on Twitter.
Yeah, so...
At AngryMarks.
Absolutely. I tend to do that for most fights, even if I'm not doing a recap. If I'm watching, I'll tweet about it.
Alright, well, as far as UFC, overall, what'd you think of the show?
I would say marginal thumbs up, because the Costas Philippou fight was, like you said, Philippou had a lot on the line and didn't show it, and Mousasi had nothing to lose but didn't really impress, so that fight was kind of a drag. The 2 split decisions, could have been more exciting. The main event delivered. I have no problem with Edgar Faber. That was a quality main event. It was just kind of there. It wasn't a great card. It wasn't a terrible card. It was just like a card for free on Saturday morning. You really can't rate it any higher than that.
No. But, I'm sure they'll be back later on in the Philippines, but I know...
Well, they're planning a lot of shows overseas. They announced a show in South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the post-fight press conference, they said, we're gonna have a show in Seoul in, November, I think. And they also announced the Saitama Super Arena for a season of Ultimate Fighter that's gonna be filmed in Japan, headlined by 2 heavyweights. Do you know which 2?
No.
Roy Big Country Nelson
and
the War Master Josh Barnett.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Aren't they fighting already?
The fight is going to be the culmination of the Ultimate Fighter Japan.
Oh.
Okay. Why are you so adamantly opposed to this?
Have you not seen the Twitter war between these 2 right now?
Well, they're building up the fight. That's the whole idea.
I think Barnett said that Nelson had gravy injections.
So this is why it's going to be fun, because Josh Barnett has that pro wrestling personality on it. He's done.
Oh, and Roy Nelson doesn't. Oh boy.
I know. Roy Nelson is a character too. That's how he's got the Burger King belly and the Big Country nickname. So
Burger King Buddha belly.
You got it. So This is going to be a fun fight. I don't know why you're complaining about this.
I'm not complaining about it. It's just when I hear that's going to be an Ultimate Fighter season, I wish we could watch this like in North America and.
It'll end up on Fight Pass. They'll put it up there.
Oh yeah, for sure. One quick note about the South Korea debut. It looks like they're going to want to have Akiyama on that card, but in South Korea he isn't known as Akiyama. He's known as Chu Sung-hoon.
Right.
So he was a major celebrity about a decade ago. That's when he was really big in Asia, and now they're looking to bring him in for their in Seoul. That was the big thing for Japanese mixed martial arts in K1. And I do have a K1 note as well in my news. Just another teaser, but very sad news.
We also have a K1 note as relates to Bellator to talk about.
Oh, it's probably the same. I'm thinking not K1. Pride and M1, sorry.
Well, yeah, I have a K1 note. You have an M1 note.
There you go. That's what I meant to say. Alright, so we're going to skip the Vegas show for just a second because we're going to talk about Bellator 137 that also happened this past weekend. And big controversy here at the weigh-ins. Stevie, why don't you explain what happened and who was in trouble?
Well, a whole lot of people were in trouble. There were at least 4, I think maybe even 5 fighters that did not make the weight on the scales. But the 2 that are most interesting and most relevant to this discussion are the 2 that were on the main Spike TV card, because Mike the Marine Rickman was supposed to fight at bantamweight for what was potentially a number 1 contenders fight with Eduardo Dantas, the former bantamweight champion, and he didn't even come close. He came in well over 139 pounds and immediately claimed in the post interview with Jimmy Smith that he dried up in the sauna, that he simply couldn't get any more weight off his body or out of his system. So they had to do some quick negotiating backstage to see whether or not Eduardo Dantas still even wanted to take this fight. And at first he said, we refuse to take the fight if he's going to be more than 147 pounds in the cage. And Rickman's camp was like, we can't promise you that because he's going to start putting weight back on immediately, and he could be well over 147. And I guess they finally gave Dantas some sort of assurance or maybe some sort of financial compensation on top of the 20% because 10% of the fine for missing the weight went to Dantas immediately. The other 10% went to the California State Athletic Commission. But I have a feeling they offered him a little extra incentive because he finally agreed to take the fight and said that he had too much adrenaline in his system to just go home without fighting. That was his excuse, but between you and me, I think that was just his way of saying they made it worth my time.
Yeah, it was a catch weight at 139 I have written down here.
Right, and we'll get to the result of that fight in a minute, but the other fight where the weight was a significant problem was the middleweight title fight. And normally when you say this about a title fight, it's the challenger who fails to make weight. Not this time. The champion, Bull Brandon Halsey, came in at 188.1 for a 185-pound title defense. And Bellator's like, oh, hell no. Effective at the end of this fight, you are no longer the champion. If you win, the title is vacated. If you lose, Kendall Grove is the new champion. But you couldn't even make weight for a title fight, so you're not our champion no matter what happens.
Yeah, let's go right to that fight at a catch weight of 188. Grove was up for the challenge and unfortunately did not become the champion.
No. I think the thing we'll take away from this fight is that Kendall Grove is a survivor because he didn't get finished until the fourth round, but he wasn't winning any of these rounds either. He just managed to hang in there and not ever get beat and always look like he had a chance. Like, there were points where you believed, okay, this is the moment Kendall Grove's going for the leg lock. Okay, this is the moment Kendall Grove will take advantage of Halsey because he's getting tired. But those opportunities didn't really present themselves. Halsey, for missing weight and for all his other faults, you know, you look at the size of the guy at middleweight and he looks like a light heavyweight because he's got so much muscle in his arms and you think he's going to tire out. He didn't tire out. He was still fresh in the fourth round.
I think Grove said at the weigh-ins, or it might have been at the stare-down or something, he was quoted saying to his opponent that he's going to bite his face off.
Yeah, there's been a lot of trash talking between Halsey and Grove building up to the fight, so they were still jaw-jacking at the weigh-ins, and they were probably jaw-jacking in the cage during the fight.
Now, you're more of a Bellator follower than I am.
Well, it's my job. MMA
no, I know
media
that,
expects me to.
I know, I'm just saying, you're more knowledgeable of Bellator than I am. I'm just going to put this out there. Who would you put in the title fight for the vacated 185 championship?
That's a good question, because they haven't sent us any kind of brief yet on who should be in the number one contender spot. Let's see. You could throw Rafael Cavallo in that mix because he just beat Joe Schilling. He'd be an acceptable choice. Ben Ryder, he's undefeated and hasn't really been on the biggest of big stages yet, but he's definitely got the credentials for it. Former champion Alexander Shlemenko.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
He should definitely be in that mix as well. And Brennan Ward, I would definitely consider him a prospect for the middleweight title in the Bellator middleweight class. So any of those four guys would be acceptable to me.
Well, we did see Shlemenko and Ward at Bellator 114 back in 2014, so.
Right, so there's possibilities out there.
Or Lombard can come back.
No, I don't view that as likely at this point.
Thought I'd pop you with that one. Fernando Gonzalez beat Curtis Millender with a guillotine choke in the third round at 1 minute and 14 seconds.
Yeah, it was come from behind guillotine choke too, because I'd say he was pretty well getting handled for the first two rounds. I had him down 20-18 going into the third, and he just, whatever, something got lit under him, and he's like, I gotta go for broke right now, or I'm not getting this. And once he got that guillotine choke, you could see he knew that was his last chance, and he was squeezing like hell to get it.
Oh yeah, like, you could tell, like, he was going for broke with that choke, so.
Mm-hmm. And it paid dividends, because this is his 4th win in a row now, and he's beaten a lot of big names in the process, including Carl the Heat Parisian and Mariusz Saromski's the former Dream champion. So you look at the list of guys he's beat on that road to 4 straight wins, and he has the best argument probably of anybody right now to say, I get the winner of Douglas Lima's next fight. If he's still a champion, I get him, and if not, I get his opponent. Either way, I'm the man.
And wrapping up the main card, Darian Caldwell beating Rafael Silva with the unanimous decision.
And that was the correct decision, because Silva, he seems to have hit a speed bump. This is a guy who put together 7 and 13 win fight streaks in his career, and at one point was looking like he was going to be the man until he ran into Joe Warren, and Joe Warren was the man there for a little while. So it's like somehow that rattled Silva. He hasn't quite been the same fighter since.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the Spike.com prelims, knockout, submission, knockout. I mean, it was a very entertaining card on Spike.
Yeah, I absolutely have no problem with any of the fights. In fact, they even showed one additional fight after the live broadcast because they didn't have time for it before things started on TV. So we got the Ben Ryder and Benji Reddick fight after the main card. And that's why I say again, Ben Ryder, maybe a lot of people didn't see it, but that's a guy to look out for in the middleweights.
Yeah, I mean, it was a replacement fight as well, so.
Yeah, Reddick came in on short notice replacing AJ Matthews, so I gotta give a lot of respect to Reddick. He's a guy I interviewed before almost 5 years ago now, and he's a very tough fighter to take this fight on a week's notice, and after having not fought for 5 years, but you could tell he didn't quite have the cardio in this fight, and how could you on a week's notice?
Do we know what injury AJ Matthews had?
I don't remember what exactly it was. I'm sure I've got a report on it somewhere, but whatever. It probably just overtraining.
Not the first time I've heard that one.
No.
Won't be the last either.
No.
Alright, so let's move on to this weekend show in Vegas, UFC 187. Main event.
We will crown a new light heavyweight champion in UFC for the first time in, 5 years?
What, 4.
4, almost 5.
You killed my joke. I was gonna say main event is John Jones and Anthony Johnson.
Yeah, right. No, the only person who beats John Jones anymore is John Jones.
And the cops.
And the cops.
Anthony Rumble Johnson, Daniel Cormier, 5 rounds, light heavyweight championship. It's very close. You could make the argument for both fighters here. Johnson's on a hell of a tear, and Cormier, Olympic level wrestler here. I don't see this stand up. I think it's going to the ground, and you got Johnson and Cormier on the ground. Man, I don't want to say stalemate, but it's going to be one missed move, 1/2 second. It's going to be something quick. Something, he's going to flip a switch. Someone's going to flip a switch. I'm really having trouble picking a winner here, but if you had a gun to my head, the new light heavyweight champion is going to be Daniel Cormier.
Well, by the narrowest of margins, the odds makers do agree with you on this one because Cormier is a slim 135 favorite, and right now Rumble Johnson is plus 115. Let me put it this way and further elaborate on what you're trying to say. It comes down to the styles, and the style that benefits Rumble Johnson most is what he's named after. He wants to rumble. He wants to go out there and hit you with his big muscular fists. And the style that benefits Cormier the most is the takedowns, the wrestling, the ground game, the control, top pressure, being heavy on you, tiring you out. So, you look at how muscular Rumble Johnson is and how big of a light heavyweight he is, and remember that this guy used to try to get down to middleweight and even to welterweight. And he had a lot of problems making that weight, for obvious reasons. He's a natural light heavyweight, maybe even a heavyweight. So he's going to be big. He's going to be muscular. That's where you start to question the cardio. You have the same argument that you had with Brandon Halsey. It's like, is his cardio going to last? And in Halsey's case, you could say yes. He proved his point. But with Rumble Johnson, we have seen him fade before as fights go longer. So, it's a factor here. And if this fight goes to the late rounds, I say Cormier wins the title. And if Rumble Johnson puts a hand on his chin early, he's the new champion.
With apologies to Benson Henderson, when Cormier is in takedown mode, it's very smooth.
Yes. Cormier has some of the best wrestling takedowns, bar none, in UFC. I'd say, in terms of, wrestling ability, he's probably got the best, but in terms of a guy who didn't have a wrestling background and still was smooth as shit with takedowns, I'd give that to George.
Yeah.
George's takedowns were pretty fucking sweet. That's one of the things I miss about seeing him fight, is that guy hit amazing takedowns.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend.
I miss seeing him hit takedowns, because they were a thing of beauty.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about it on, I think it was either off air or maybe it was on Thursday Night AMP, about the new drug regulations, the new suspensions that were announced, and with those in place, I'm more confident that GSP will return. I'm more confident than I was last week.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about it because it broke after we taped our show last week. But
yeah,
for those who haven't heard, 4-year ban if you're caught, and then a lifetime ban if you're caught again after that.
No, that's only for if you screw up if you give like a horse urine sample. It's 4 than life. If you're steroids, it's like 3 then 4 than life. It's a 3-strike policy, but the first one is like 2 or 3 years, and it's like these fighters, 2 or 3 years, that is your career. I mean, it'll take you a long time to get back to UFC conditioning levels.
These are finally some penalties that have teeth in them, because people used to complain that if you got a 6 or a 9-month suspension, for some UFC fighters, that could be the amount of time they would sit out between fights anyway. So you give a guy a 9-month suspension, it really doesn't affect him. You give a guy a 3-year suspension, that's 3 or 4 fights. That's a lot of time.
And of course, like, is the higher the suspension, the more percentage of your purse you're forfeiting. But the only one that had 2 strikes was 4 than life was altering a urine sample or doing something
I thought there was
like
also
that.
a sanction for running away from a test that was
That's under that same, under the same thing. You're screwing with the test, basically. Either you don't, you pull the
basically
Wanderlei
pull
Silva.
the Wanderlei Silva. You try to run away from the test instead of taking it.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to get to that.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're going to get to that in the news, so I won't spoil it now.
Yeah. Alright, so.
Back to this card. Speaking of guys who you wonder if they pass a steroid test, Vitor Belfort versus Chris Weidman.
I thought you were going to accuse Weidman of taking something.
No, not him. Not at all. I'm talking about Belfort, because I can't tell you how many fights I've been to where the reporters have sat around making jokes about Vitor Belfort and Alistair Overeem, how they would have before and after pictures of those two guys.
Wow. Is this his last stand? Is this the last title fight we'll see for Belfort if he loses?
I don't know if he could earn his way back to another title shot, but I would never say never.
Weidman coming off an injury. The fight was postponed to this date here. He's 100% now as far as everybody knows.
And he is the heavy favorite as far as the odds makers know. He is minus 525 and Belfort is plus 415.
That's a little heavy on I'd put money on Belfort in that case.
You know what? I like those odds though, because they're taking into account the stringent drug testing that Belfort has been under for this fight. And I think that makes a difference. He's not going to have that. I'm not saying he was getting away with things in Brazil, but he was getting away with things in Brazil.
I'm saying, I think Weidman wins the fight, but with those odds, I got an extra $20 lying around.
I don't know. I think a fool and his money are soon parted in that case. Bet on Weidman.
My bet in Iowa State, look what happened there. Oh.
Yeah, well, you know what? If you bet on them when they played Oklahoma State, you made a mint.
That's true. College sports, gotta love it. Anyways, moving on to the lightweights, Donald Cerrone, who's on this card. Again, Donald Cerrone. I mean, he's going for that record, I think, this year.
Yes, he is. And he's fighting a replacement fighter, actually. This is not the original fight. We were supposed to get Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Donald Cerrone in what was essentially a number 1 contenders fight. But because Khabib is injured, he is being replaced on short notice by John Makdessi.
And,
speaking of guys going for a record.
Yeah, he's was in Montreal. suffered like 0.0% damage in that fight.
Yeah, he got a sweet-ass knockout late in the first round.
He's like, I can go again.
Yeah.
So they did.
And props to him. You know, he's already in shape and probably feeling like he's on top of the world right now after that win. So
you want to fight third from the top in a Vegas show? Where's my pen? My pen is somewhere.
And I know they offered him a sweet bonus for doing that. I'm sure they made it up to him on the back end. So, and hey, biggest profile fight of Mac Dempsey's career, bar none.
A win off Cerrone really boosts your profile in the UFC rankings. So
that would shoot him almost to the top overnight, because Cerrone is right there near the top right now.
Yeah, Cerrone's top 3?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Third,
the fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov was potentially the next contender for the title.
I guess he's even ranked in lightweight division, so.
Yeah, so that's a huge step up, but it's also too huge for the odds makers to believe it's going to happen. Yeah. Cerrone is minus 500, Mac Dempsey is plus 400 as of the recording of this show.
Yeah, I can see those odds a little bit more believable, but I mean, once that door closes, anything is possible. We've seen it before, so.
Of course, yeah. Like Matt Serra and GSP, anything is possible.
Was it Shlemenko and Ortiz, or am I screwing up my Russian names again?
Yeah, well, Shlemenko did fight Ortiz, so.
And Ortiz won that fight.
Right, and most people thought that Shlemenko was the superior fighter, but Ortiz was just way too big for him. Literally, physically too big for him to handle.
And not just his head.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Travis Brown against Andrei Arlovsky. This fight, I know I'm gonna get in trouble for this one. This has train wreck written all over it.
Well, yes, I would expect it to be a train barreling through Arlovsky, because Hopper Brown is minus 450 right now.
Mm-hmm.
That feels right to me, because
it does.
Arlovsky has gotten a few gift decisions, has had one good performance, but he hasn't really faced a guy who can wreck his shit, and Hopper Brown is that guy.
Okay, Steve, you're the more polite person between the two of us on this show. When you say gift decision on a silver platter with a big effing bow on it, okay? That's how much these gift decisions were for Arlovsky.
Yeah, he's not getting any gifts for Christmas in this fight. Brown is, I know some people think Hopper Brown is overrated, but I've also sat cage side to see the man fight, and I know.
Who said he's overrated? He's not overrated.
I've seen people on the MMA Mania forums saying that he's overrated, but I think those are probably people who are riding on Andrei Arlovsky's jock. I don't think Hopper Brown is overrated. I think he blows through him.
Better his jock than a Muay Thai cup.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Jesus. Joseph Benavidez against John Moraga to wrap up the main card.
And this is pretty much a story of lopsided odds on the main card. Other than the fight between Cormier and Johnson, every one of these is a heavy line, and Benavidez is the minus 600 favorite. John Moraga is plus 450.
Minus 600 for Benavidez?
I have no problem with that. You're talking about arguably the only guy that's going to be a challenger to Demetrius Johnson for another crack. You know, it's like, you keep talking about it's not who's next, it's who's left.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting to the point where they have to recycle contenders, and Benavidez is one of the strongest in the flyweight class, and Moraga's not even close to on his level.
It sounds a bigger number than what it should be, but like, I see where they're going with that one for sure.
Yeah. I mean, the other guy that you could potentially argue is a contender is John Dodson, and he's minus 470 on this card. Zach Makovsky is plus 375, but there's the one where I would be tempted to lay $20 on it, because Makovsky is definitely underrated. He's not overrated, he's underrated. The guy is really good.
No, I agree with you on that one. And Dotson, I'm not saying Clay Guida, but his energy level is always off the charts.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes John Dodson so dangerous, is he's so fast, and he's one of the hardest hitters at flyweight. He has very explosive punching power.
The next fight it's a coin flip fight for me. It's Dong Hyun Kim against Josh Berkman.
Yeah, the People's Warrior, Josh Berkman.
Against the Donger.
Yep, and the Donger is minus 280, Berkman is plus 240. And again, that sounds about right to me. I wouldn't say Berkman has no chance, but I think the Donger is the better fighter of the two at this point in their respective career.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that one. Moving on, Uriah Hall against Rafael Natal in the middleweight division.
Hall's a fairly sizable favorite here, minus 350. The comeback on Natal is plus 290.
Now, you have to tell me the line on this next one, because I really don't know who to pick on this one.
What, Rose Namajunas and Nina Ansarov?
Yeah.
That should have been obvious right from the get-go. Namajunas is minus 280.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was closer than that.
No. I mean, it's actually closer than I expected. I would have thought Rose would be like a minus 400 favorite.
Oh. Okay.
Rose is damn good, dude.
Ansarov is pretty good too, though.
I think Rose is on another level.
Okay. Well, that's why they fight the fights, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Justin Scoggins and Josh Sampo kick off the Fight Pass fights. That's an interesting fight there.
Yep, and minus 350 for Scoggins.
Any other fights you want to talk about on this one?
Yeah, I believe that Filthy Tom Lawler is cornering Mike Pyle for his fight against Colby Covington.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I heard him say on the Figure 4 Daily Show with Brian. And Covington is the minus 270 favorite.
All right. Moving on to one new fight this week of interest, Bellator 139, June 26th in Mulvane, Kansas. Bubba Jenkins fights Joe Wilk.
Yep, Joe the Nose Wilk. I know you gotta love that nickname. The Nose Knows.
Oliver knows.
No, this time the Nose knows. And he's pretty much on this card to be the local fan favorite because all his fights are in the Midwest for either Titan FC or Victory. And his one other fight for Bellator was also in Kansas, so they put him on this card with a good reason.
Do you remember what the main event is for that show?
Yeah, that would be Volkov and, what's the other heavyweight? Congo. Volkov and Congo.
I was gonna say, hang on the shorts, don't hang on the shorts.
Yeah, it's Volkov and Congo, but
yeah.
The K1 note that I made earlier was they announced, the fourth and final fight for the main card of that show. And it was Stitch 'em Up Joe Schilling versus Hisaki Kato.
Ooh. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming you've heard about Hisaki Kato then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because not a lot of people have. He's fought entirely in Japan up until now, and he's got a 4-1 record.
I try to watch a little bit more Japan these days for some reason. I always find it's a good breeding ground for when they come to North America, whether it's Bellator, whether it's UFC, and it's their first time under the bright lights here. I kind of get a better feeling of who they are and what kind of styles, and it's...
Well, and you're at a competitive advantage because you get the Fight Network, and they show a lot of that stuff from Japan.
Yeah. Alright, well, moving on to the news and notes, and we do have some sad news, and Stevie, I was invited to come on Thursday night at AMP to talk about Corey Hill. There was some controversy, he had fungal pneumonia. Lung transplant, it collapsed. The news outlets are reporting that he passed away. In fact, he didn't pass away. UFC, F4W, a bunch of news sites had Corey Hill dead at 36 stories, and they were all retracted because, hey, he's still breathing. No, he passed away the next day.
Yeah, he hung on for a day, but it was finally too much for him on Friday, and he couldn't hang on any longer. So the reports came in early, and they were wrong, but in the end, they were right, which is unfortunate, but it's not something you can really come back from. Getting fungal pneumonia, having a collapsed lung, getting a lung transplant.
Yeah.
That's a lot to go through in a short amount of time, and even guys as tough as a former Ultimate Fighter, that's a lot to overcome. There's some things you just can't be tough enough to fight.
No, if you want to see him Ultimate Fighter, it's season 5.
Mm-hmm. And don't watch the fight where he breaks his leg.
No, God, no.
Yeah, that was, like you said before, that was worthy of Anderson Silva, what happened to him.
I never wanted to see it again, and then I saw it again with Anderson Silva. Never again do I want to see anyone's leg go at that angle, ever again.
Right, and, in hindsight, I kind of wish Corey Hill had just retired after that fight, because it didn't seem like his career trajectory from that point on was very good. He ended up out of the UFC. He won a couple of fights in the minor leagues. Then he lost like 5 fights in a row. It just, I know this probably would have happened to him no matter what. You know, weird shit happens in life. Sometimes you get cancer, or you get some sort of rare infection, or you get staph, or you get whatever, and it's just the luck of the draw. So this might have happened to him whether he was fighting or not. But in the back of my mind, I have to think it just wasn't meant to be for Corey. Once he had that leg break, that probably should have been his signal that a long career as a fighter was not in the cards for him. And he was susceptible to that anyway, because he was one of those guys that was very well built up top and had very skinny legs down below, so he was always going to be susceptible to an injury like that.
Well, thoughts and prayers go to the family and friends for sure.
Of course, to his wife, to his friends, to his colleagues, to Cormier in particular, because they were teammates in college, so that's got to be weighing heavy on Cormier's mind going into the fight this week.
He might have some type of tribute on his shorts, or maybe something to sign, or something on the way to the cage.
I'm sure it will also be mentioned. I would be stunned if Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg didn't mention it on commentary. I'm sure they will pay their respects.
Mm-hmm. Alright, we talked about Frankie Edgar possibly getting the next shot at Aldo McGregor winner there. Let's move on to Wanderlei Silva. A Nevada judge has overturned his lifetime ban, so Silva now has a return date in front of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Here's the tricky part. The UFC might prevent him from fighting in other promotions like Bellator, because technically he's still under contract with the UFC, but then technically he also retired from mixed martial arts. So it's a sticky wicket, as the British would say.
And I don't think he's getting out easy just because the judge overturned his lifetime ban, because we talked about those new rules, and one of them was that if you run away from a test, that's a 4-year suspension, which is what he did, which is why they made that rule. So
the thing is, we're talking about jurisdictions.
The judge presiding over this ruling that Wanderlei Silva's lifetime ban was overturned said it's not being overturned because the Nevada State Athletic Commission doesn't have jurisdiction. They still do, because even if he wasn't under license as a fighter at the time, he was still a contracted fighter and still going to be fighting at any time because of that contract. So they still had jurisdictional oversight. What the penalty they gave was egregious, but their ability to give the penalty was not. Which is why he said you have a new hearing now. They have to come up with a different sanction, but you're still under their thumb.
Yeah, and it's one of the things where when it comes to this whole situation, it opens a can of worms now, because you don't need to be technically a licensed fighter to get that knock on the door from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, because in this ruling it's setting a precedent.
And I think it's a good precedent. I think the precedent that if you are under a UFC contract, you can give a sample at any time is a good one to set, especially with these new harsher penalties that they're putting out there.
Now, do you think it was a coincidence that the new rules were set in place and this hearing, like this decision at the same time?
You can call it a coincidence if you want to. I think this was the plan all along, regardless of what the decision was for Silva. I think if he'd lost, they would have done it. I think if he'd won, they would have done it. It wouldn't have mattered. They were going to do this no matter what.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you ever see him in UFC ever again?
Here's what I said when people got all excited that the lifetime ban was overturned on MMA Mania. I said, well, they can't ban him for a lifetime now, because they would need to give him another strike and make it a lifetime if he fails again. But give him the 4-year ban, and that effectively ends his career anyway, because he's already past his prime as a fighter. So in 4 years' time, he really shouldn't be fighting at that point.
See, I'd fight that because the rule wasn't in place.
Or I would say, if you don't want to make it a 4-year ban and you want to give him some sort of unrestricted access to fighting again, then fight promoters should get together and all agree that every offer he gets for a fight should be so insulting he wouldn't accept it. Like, offer him $25 to take a fight. No way he's going to take a fight for that. So he effectively is banned without being banned because he'll turn down every offer he gets.
Okay, well, I would suspend him for 2 years. He'd be 40 when the suspension is over.
I still say 4 years. He can argue that rule wasn't in place when he was given the original ban, but he can't argue that this new set of rules was announced before he got his lifetime ban overturned, and based on the new set of rules they announced, he would get a 4-year ban.
Well, whatever happens, I'm sure Chael Sonnen will have something interesting to say about it on Twitter.
Well, the whole problem with Chael saying anything about it is he's not exactly clean himself.
That's true.
They both ought to just keep their mouth shut about it. But Chael makes his living with his mouth, so he's not going to keep
Chael shutting his mouth? Come on now.
That I just said he makes his living with his mouth, so he's not keeping his mouth shut. But he doesn't really have a lot of room to talk about Vanderlei running from a test when he pissed hot himself.
I heard he's working with Global Force Wrestling now.
He's, I believe, going to be an announcer or a commentator for them.
Jeez, next thing you know, they're going to bring in JR again.
Well, they actually are in talks with JR.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, but I believe WWE is also pitching woo to him, so it depends on where he feels his future lies.
He was good at the UFC show he did with Chael. Or not UFC. It was a one-night tournament show.
Yeah, in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Let's move on to World Series of Fighting, and they've lost their strawweight champ as Jessica Aguilar has requested her release, and technically it looks like she's a free agent right now, and World Series of Fighting won't stand in her way. She is the best fighter, number 1 ranked strawweight, I think, everywhere right now, and she wants to go to UFC.
Yeah, they pretty much had to admit they tried as an experiment to have a strawweight division to compete in the mixed martial arts landscape, but because UFC had pretty much wiped out the map by signing every good strawweight in the world, including all the ones that used to be in Invicta, there really wasn't anybody left for Jessica Aguilar to fight. They were having to scramble to find fights for her, and they couldn't keep it up, and it was just time to admit they weren't ever going to build a strawweight division around her with UFC getting all the best of the best.
When they announced Tough 20 with the strawweights, it was game over.
Yeah, it was pretty much a done deal, but they tried. I mean, they went out there and scouted the few strawweights they could bring in to make things interesting, and she just had her way with every one of them, so that it was pretty much a wrap.
Now, you want a good laugh, Stevie?
Sure, why not? I'm always up for a good laugh.
John Dodson says that he can knock out anyone at flyweight, bantamweight, and even Conor McGregor.
Well, that's
Come
fine.
Come on.
I don't agree with him, but it's fine if he wants to act like it's just put on a brave face and swagger a little bit. That's up to him. That's his call. He's
being drug tested after that comment, right?
You could say that about a lot of braggadocious things a lot of fighters say.
That's true. Let's see, going to the world of former M1 and Pride fighters, and this is a really sad tale.
Well, the way you said that, I thought you were going to start singing a song. You were like, going to the country, gonna eat a lot of peaches, going to the news, I gotta share a sad story.
Wow. Alexander Emelianenko, the younger brother of Fedor, has been sent to a Russian jail for 4.5 years for aggravated sexual assault.
Yeah, this is not something we can actually joke about. This is pretty screwed up.
Yeah, and he fought in M1, he fought in Pride. Although it's interesting, he never fought in the States. It was scheduled to fight, I believe, for Affliction, but the visas or licensing, some type of hiccup with the paperwork, he never fought in the United States.
No, well, he really only got fights because of his brother. He wasn't, I wouldn't consider him the cream of the crop as a fighter.
No, I mean, he did have an 8-fight winning streak at one point, but as you said, not exactly top-level competition.
No.
But, You see that name pop up and Emelianenko, like, oh, Fedor. No, his brother. Oh, is he fighting? Oh, he's a different type of fight. Okay.
Yeah, he's going to be in a different kind of fight altogether now. It's going to be the fight in the locker room over the soap.
Whoa. Too far.
Yeah, well, you know that because he's a former fighter, everybody in jail is going to try to test him to see how tough he really is.
Yeah, not just any jail, a Russian jail.
Yeah, exactly. He ain't getting no breaks there.
No. Alright, so Michael Bisping has commented on UFC 187's middleweight title fight. He says, with no magic sauce, Belfort is unlikely to beat Weidman.
That's pretty much what I said.
Bisping just can't control himself when it comes to Belfort, can he?
No, but he's absolutely 100% right. I do not disagree with a single thing he said.
Yeah. Alright, well, let's move on to the last story on my list here, and I'm sure you have other stuff I forgot, but Cyborg is at it again, trying to get a fight with Ronda Rousey, going to, of all things, Facebook, and in my opinion, she's trying to bait Rousey into a fight. Rousey was on Howard Stern this past week and said Cyborg is just roids, muscle, and no technique. So Cyborg responded with, I'm going to take some select quotes here. You can tell she isn't happy with life. She is world champion in the UFC and has the same grumpy face no matter what picture you see of her. In almost every interview she gives, she's talking bad about people, whether it's me, Miesha Tate, the ring card girls, or an ex-boyfriend. And the only time she ever says anything good about someone is when she's talking about herself. I'm sure even she doesn't really believe she's got the best ass in MMA. And it just goes on and on. There's this line about, this is a girl with very few genuine friends. I mean, the UFC practically had to beg fighters to congratulate her on Twitter for making the cover of Sports Illustrated. And the last one here, this is the big bait here. There was a reason why she is saying she will only fight at 135, despite telling anyone who will listen that she would beat Cain Velasquez, fight Layla Ali, or whatever other nonsense she will come up with in her next interview. And that's because when she loses to me, she will lose her whole identity. When the cameras aren't around and everyone has gone home, I think she's just a really lonely, unhappy soul, and that's a sad way to live your life.
Well,
that's them fine words, I'll tell you what.
You asked me for my opinion before we recorded the show tonight, and I'm going to share it with our listeners right now. I don't think it matters what she says. I don't think she's going to win the mental game with Ronda Rousey, because Ronda Rousey, as far as female fighters these days, has pretty much invented the mental game, has pretty much dominated the mental game, has pretty much proved her superiority in every way possible in a fight, both physically and mentally. So, for Cyborg to try to get in her head, it's just blowing a lot of smoke and achieving nothing.
She's trying, though.
Yeah. This is the only thing she's doing is proving that Ronda Rousey is in her head, if anything.
Well, Miesha Tate had her 2 cents as well this week, and basically, paraphrasing here, but said she would fight Cyborg at 140 at a catchweight because that's her job.
Okay.
And if that's a veiled shot at Rousey or a shot at Cyborg, but it's like, I'll fight her because I'm a fighter, that's what we do.
Okay.
So, at 140, Miesha Tate Cyborg, in a UFC octagon, who do you got?
I would probably take Cyborg, as long as she's not drug tested.
Because I think they are, obviously drug tested.
Yeah, but
Cyborg
she has failed the test.
I know. Cyborg is signed with UFC though, right?
Yeah, we've already had that water under the bridge for a while now.
You have, okay, yeah. So, will we see the fight? I don't know. There's so many different working parts with that because, as you said, the drug history with Cyborg in the past. If Rousey takes it, where would you have the fight? Is it at 135? Can Cyborg make 135?
She can if she's not on the gas.
Didn't she have like a doctor's note saying it's unhealthy for her to go down to 135?
Yeah, that was Tito Ortiz's whole smoke screen for why they weren't going to let her fight at 135, was that a doctor said she can't she basically couldn't have babies if she cut that much weight because it would wreck her whole body.
I don't know. If we ever see it, it'd be interesting. It'd be like one of those super fights that's becoming more rare as the days go on. So
I have to yawn though because this talk gets old. Not that you're making me tired, but that I'm tired of hearing about it until the fight takes place. It's not getting us anywhere to continually speculate whether or not the fight's actually going to happen. Ronda Rousey has no shortage of contenders to knock off right now, and Cyborg can just sit on her ass, make all the trash talk she wants, and wait, because she can't do anything else. She has to wait until Rousey beats everybody else, and then she has to come down to 135 and face her.
Would you consider that fight a super fight?
You know what? It depends on if Cyborg stays as dominant as she has been. If we see Cyborg continue to wreck people at featherweight and then drop down to bantamweight to face Rousey, then yes. But if somebody comes along and beats Cyborg between now and then, it's going to be like a super fight, but it won't seem as super of a fight.
Well,
it's kind of like Pacquiao and Mayweather. Yes, it can be made into a big deal, but it would have been an even bigger deal when Pacquiao was undefeated.
Oh, I don't think Cyborg and Rousey will be $100 a pop.
No, but I'm saying it's the kind of fight that there's a lot of anticipation for, and the anticipation alone will make it a big deal, but they may pass their window of opportunity for how big it could have been.
The only problem I have with that is when it comes to this fight, is this only for the hardcores? Would the casual MMA fans give a damn about it?
No, I think by the time this fight actually takes place, enough people will have heard about Cyborg that whether or not they've watched her, they'll be interested. I mean, her freaking name is Cyborg. If that doesn't catch the casual fan, I don't know what would.
I think you have to do a UFC, countdown special to bring the casual fans up to speed. Because that would be a four-parter.
You know what you do?
What?
I'm dead serious when I say this, and people are going to think I'm joking, but I'm dead serious. You give her the Terminator entrance that Triple H had at WrestleMania.
I knew you were going to go there.
I'm not kidding. If you want to make this a big deal and hook the casual fans, that's how you introduce her. You have her rise up through the ground with a whole trophy full of skulls in each hand and walk down to the ring and say, I am Cyborg. That's how you hook people.
Well, is it Joan Jett that does the song for Ronda Rousey?
I don't remember what Rousey's entrance is.
It's Joan Jett. It's Bad Reputation.
Okay.
Have her do a live entrance for Rousey if you're going to do the Terminator entrance. Might as well have Joan Jett do it live.
You know what? I bet that could be done. I bet that could be arranged.
Oh. It'd be very cool to see, and
or get a punk rock band to do a cover of it. You may not get Joan Jett, but you could pay somebody to do a cover of it.
The Luchagors.
There you go.
But obviously, I know you're getting tired of talking about it. I'm getting there too. It's just the more layers this story gets, the more pages are being written about it. If this ever does happen, and we just saw with Pacquiao and Mayweather, it can happen. A fight that has been years in the making can finally happen. It gives that fight more hope.
Yeah, I'm not going to spend 3 years talking about it like boxing fans did with Mayweather Pacquiao. I'm not going to keep talking about it for 3 straight years like boxing fans did.
Yeah, it was one of those dream things, so. Let's see. I got something new here. Hold on. Jessica Aguilar says on Carla Esparza's PED allegations, whoever beats her is on drugs. What?
I don't even understand that story.
I don't know either. I just saw that on my Twitter, so.
Then sometimes you should just leave Twitter alone and call it a night.
I don't know the answer to this question, so you might know it. If not, we'll answer it next week. But off the top of your head, if Belfort wins on Saturday, he becomes UFC's third 2-division champ. Who are the other 2-division champs?
Well, that one of them would be Randy Couture, because he was the light heavyweight and the heavyweight champion.
Mm-hmm.
Who's the other? Let me think for a minute.
I think I know who it is.
I'm gonna say BJ Penn.
That's what I'm thinking too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna think of his theme song, but you know what it's called. I can remember the name of the title of that song.
It's Hawaii 78. Well, it's also, it's Hawaii 78 mixed with A Ala A.
Ayla, thank you. That's
both songs are by Israel Kamekaweliwe.
Oh, jeez, going for bonus points now.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it. That's all the news I got on my list. Is there anything in yours that I forgot to mention?
Absolutely not, Peter. You were very thorough this week. We have covered everything.
All right. Do you have any idea what's on tap for Thursday night AMP?
Well, originally we were going to talk to Jamin Olivencia of Ohio Valley Wrestling fame, but that has been postponed because he's picked up some dates for Global Force Wrestling. So
good for him.
Yeah, so we'll be talking to him at a later date, and probably we'll just revisit Payback and talk about that card.
Talk about a certain Canadian making his debut on Raw?
Yeah, we'll probably talk about that too.
And of course, check out all the other good shows on the network. Over the top radio, Undisputed Wrestling Show. For those who missed it, was there 4 clips now of that DiBiase interview?
Yep, all 4 of them. The entire interview, all up on youtube.com/AngryMarks.com.
And it's .com. You have to spell out DOTCOM.
Absolutely.
But yeah, check out all the shows in the network. There's a link on AngryMarks.com, so check that out. And
follow Peter on Twitter @HardcoreCDN.
And Stevie's @AngryMarks. And tell the listeners, Stevie, did you do anything exciting on Memorial Day?
Well, my Memorial Day is going to be spent watching UFC 187.
Oh, it wasn't a holiday for you this past Monday?
No, Memorial Day is this weekend, dude.
Our holiday was this Monday. It just passed.
No. Memorial Day in the United States is the same weekend as the fights.
Oh.
Which is why they usually have a big card the 3rd week in May, because that's a holiday for everybody. That's why the Figure 4 convention used to be in May, because it was Memorial Day weekend.
9 times out of 10, Victoria Day and Memorial Day are on the same weekend, but this year, not in this case.
Nope.
All right, well, have a good Memorial Day, and and I'm sure you'll have a great one, maybe a barbecue on the Monday.
If the weather's permitting. It's been pretty cold and clammy here, so it'll have to clear up by the weekend.
It's good football weather, at least.
Not really.
Well, CFL, I'm thinking the training camp is starting soon, so. Mm-hmm. All right, well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening, and as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya!
Who wants a KO for Christmas?